The Alpha's Forgotten Bride. Complete story. The slave market, a place of broken dreams. The iron chains felt cold against Sarah's wrists, but she barely noticed anymore. After 8 years, pain had become her constant companion, so familiar that she'd forgotten what freedom felt like. She stood on the wooden platform in the center of the underground market, one of 15 women being displayed like livestock. The smell of unwashed bodies and desperation hung thick in the air. Lot number 47. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowd. Female, 25 years old, strong build, no major illnesses. Came from the Moon Valley pack before its destruction. Starting bid, 500 gold pieces. Sarah kept her eyes down, staring at the rough wooden planks beneath her bare feet. She'd learned long ago that looking at the buyers only made things worse. Some took eye contact as defiance and wanted to break you. Others saw it as permission to imagine all the terrible things they'd do once they owned you. The crowd murmured, but no one bid. She wasn't surprised. She'd been through this 3 times before, sold and resold when her owners either died or grew bored. She was too thin, too scarred, too obviously broken to interest most buyers. The pretty ones always went first, the ones who still had hope shining in their eyes. Sarah had no hope left. 500! Someone finally called. A fat merchant who smelled like old wine. 550! Another voice, this one belonging to a cruel-faced woman who collected slaves like some people collected jewelry. Sarah felt nothing. It didn't matter who bought her. One cage was much like another. When the heartless Alpha walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees, and Sarah felt the change even with her eyes down. Conversations stopped mid-word. The auctioneer's confident voice faltered. Something powerful had just entered the market. "That's Alpha Kale Nightshade," someone whispered, the words carrying in the sudden silence. Sarah's heart stopped. Then it started again, pounding so hard she thought her ribs might crack. No, couldn't be. Not here. Not now. She kept her eyes down, but her whole body had gone rigid. 8 years. 8 years since she'd last heard that name. 8 years since the boy she'd loved had promised to come back for her and never did. "I apologize for the interruption," a deep voice said, and Sarah's knees nearly buckled. That voice. She knew that voice, even though it was deeper now, harder, emptied of all the warmth she remembered. "Continue." "Of course, Alpha Nightshade. An honor to have you here." The auctioneer had found his obsequious tone. "We're currently on lot 47. Current bid is 550 gold pieces." Sarah could feel eyes on her. His eyes. After all these years, Kale was looking at her, and he didn't even know who she was. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He'd forgotten her. Completely, totally forgotten the girl he'd promised to love forever. "Let me see her face," Kale's voice commanded. The guard beside Sarah grabbed her hair and yanked her head up brutally. She couldn't help the small sound of pain that escaped her lips. Their eyes met. His were still the same startling gold color she remembered, the mark of powerful alpha blood. But everything else was different. His face had hardened, losing all traces of the gentle young man she'd known. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. His black hair was longer, pulled back in a severe style. He looked older than his 32 years, like something had carved away everything soft and left only steel behind. She searched his eyes desperately for any sign of recognition, any hint that he remembered her, remembered them, remembered the promises he'd made under a full moon in a forest that no longer existed. Nothing. His gold eyes swept over her face with the detached assessment of someone evaluating merchandise. Something inside Sarah's chest, some last fragile piece of hope she hadn't even known she was still holding, finally shattered. The purchase that changed everything. 3,000 gold pieces, Kale said calmly. The market erupted in shocked murmurs. 3,000 gold was an insane amount for a slave, especially one in Sarah's condition. It was enough to buy 10 premium slaves or a small house in a decent part of town. 3,000, the auctioneer repeated, his voice climbing with excitement. "Do I hear 3,500? Silence. No one was foolish enough to bid against Alpha Nightshade, especially not when he was clearly determined to win. Sold to Alpha Kale Nightshade for 3,000 gold pieces. The guard released Sarah's hair and she lowered her head again, trembling. This couldn't be happening. Of all the people in all the world who could have bought her, it had to be him. The man she'd loved. The man who'd forgotten her completely. Kale approached the platform, and Sarah could smell him now. Pine and snow and something wild that called to a part of her she'd thought was dead. Her wolf, silent for 8 years, stirred for the first time since the night her pack was slaughtered. No, she couldn't let her wolf wake up. She couldn't survive feeling that bond again, not when he clearly felt nothing. Remove her chains, Kale ordered. I don't keep my property in iron. Property. The word cut deeper than any blade. The guards obeyed quickly, unlocking the heavy shackles around her wrists and ankles. Sarah's legs nearly gave out when the weight was removed. She'd worn those chains for 6 months straight. A hand caught her elbow, steadying her. Kale's hand. His touch sent electricity through her entire body, and she hated herself for still reacting to him. Can you walk? He asked, his voice neither kind nor cruel, just practical. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. If she spoke, she might scream. Or cry. Or both. The journey to Nightshade Manor. The carriage was the finest thing Sarah had been inside in 8 years. Soft velvet seats, silk curtains, the lingering scent of expensive cologne. She sat on the floor as was proper for slaves, while Kale sat above on the bench seat. He'd been silent since they left the market, apparently content to ignore her entirely. Sarah was grateful. She didn't think she could handle conversation. Not with him, not yet. But she couldn't stop herself from stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. He'd changed so much. The boy she'd known had been strong but gentle, quick to laugh, with kind eyes that saw the best in everyone. This man was carved from ice, his expression revealing nothing, his posture that of someone always ready for battle. What had happened to him? What had turned him into this? What's your name? Kale asked suddenly, and Sarah flinched. For a moment she considered telling him. Considered saying, it's me, Sarah. Don't you remember? You promised to come back for me. But what would be the point? He'd made it clear he didn't know her. Either he truly had forgotten, or he was pretending not to remember. And Sarah wasn't sure which possibility hurt more. Sarah, she whispered, the first word she'd spoken in weeks. Sarah, he repeated. And she hated how her name sounded in his mouth, like a stranger testing out an unfamiliar word. Do you know who I am? Yes, master. The word tasted like ash. You're Alpha Kale Nightshade. Just Kale is fine when we're in private. I'm not fond of formality. He paused. Have we met before? Sarah's heart leaped, then crashed. He was asking because he felt something, some echo of what they'd been. But he didn't actually remember. No, Master Kale, she lied. We've never met. It was easier this way. If he didn't remember her, then she could at least keep her dignity. She could serve him as a stranger and guard the broken pieces of her heart. The carriage rode on through the night, carrying them toward Nightshade Manor, toward a future Sarah couldn't begin to imagine. She'd thought the worst day of her life was the day her pack was destroyed. But this, being this close to the man she'd loved, the man who'd forgotten her, this might actually be worse. Arrival at Nightshade Manor. The manor appeared through the trees like something from a dream. It was massive, built of dark stone with towers that seemed to touch the clouds. Torches lined the path, illuminating gardens that looked like they belonged in a fairy tale. Fountains, sculptures, and flower beds arranged with mathematical precision. Sarah had grown up in a comfortable pack house. Nothing fancy but warm and filled with love. This place was beautiful but cold, like Kale himself. Servants rushed out to greet them, bowing low to their alpha. Sarah noticed how they moved, not with fear exactly, but with extreme caution. This was not a place where mistakes were tolerated. Mrs. Hemsworth, Kale addressed an older woman who appeared to be the head housekeeper. This is Sarah. She'll need a room in the servant quarters, basic supplies, and a healer to check her condition. Of course, Alpha. Mrs. Hemsworth's eyes swept over Sarah with the practiced assessment of someone who'd seen thousands of servants come and go. I'll see to it personally. Cale started to walk away, then paused. And Mrs. Hemsworth? She's not to be mistreated or overworked until the healer clears her. She's quite thin. It was the closest thing to kindness he'd shown, and it made Sarah's throat tight. Understood, Alpha. Then he was gone, disappearing into his massive manor without a backward glance, leaving Sarah standing in his courtyard with chains of a different kind binding her heart. The servant quarters, a cage made of memory. The room was small but clean, a narrow bed, a simple dresser, a wash basin. To Sarah, who'd spent the last year sleeping on dungeon floors, it was luxury. Mrs. Hemsworth had been surprisingly gentle, providing fresh clothes, basic toiletries, and a meal that Sarah had barely been able to eat. Now, alone for the first time in months, Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself to feel everything she'd been holding back. The tears came silently. She'd learned long ago how to cry without making sound. He didn't remember. 8 years ago, Cale had held her under the full moon and told her she was his fated mate. He'd kissed her with such tenderness, promised they'd announce their bond as soon as he returned from his urgent pack business. He'd said nothing could make him forget her, but something had. Sarah looked down at her wrist, at the thin white scar that marked where Cale had once cut himself and pressed his blood to hers in a traditional mate promise. The scar he'd looked right at today and seen nothing familiar in. You promised, she whispered to the empty room. You promised you'd never forget. But he had. And now she was his slave, bought and owned by the man who'd once been her everything. Sarah lay down on the bed, curling into herself. Tomorrow she would be strong. Tomorrow she would figure out how to survive this impossible situation. But tonight, she let herself mourn for the girl she'd been 8 years ago, for the love she'd thought was eternal, for the future that had been stolen from her. Outside her small window, the full moon rose, the same moon that had witnessed their promises. Sarah closed her eyes against its light. She'd survived the destruction of her pack. She'd survived slavery. Somehow she'd survive this too, even if it killed her. Buried memories, 2,000 words. 8 years ago, the forest meeting. The memory hit Sarah as she lay in the darkness of her servant's room, as vivid as if it were happening again. She'd been 17, sneaking through the Moon Valley forest with her heart pounding and a smile she couldn't control. The visiting Alpha from Nightshade territory had asked to meet her privately, away from the watchful eyes of her father and the pack elders. Cale had been 24 then, already powerful but not yet hardened by whatever had turned him cold. He'd arrived 2 weeks earlier to discuss a potential alliance between Moon Valley and Nightshade, and from the moment their eyes met across the council room, Sarah had felt something fundamental shift in her chest. The mate bond, the thing every wolf dreamed of finding. You came. Cale's voice had come from the shadows, warm and slightly nervous. Did you think I wouldn't? Sarah had teased, stepping into the moonlit clearing. He'd emerged from behind an ancient oak tree, and the moonlight had caught his gold eyes, making them glow. He was beautiful, tall and strong, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and a smile that made her stomach flip. I wasn't sure. Your father doesn't seem to like me much. My father doesn't like anyone who looks at his youngest daughter the way you do. Cale had laughed, the sound rich and genuine. And how do I look at you? Like I'm the only person in the room, in the world. He'd closed the distance between them, his hand reaching up to cup her cheek with such gentleness. That's because you are. Sarah, I've met hundreds of wolves in my life, traveled to dozens of packs. But from the moment I saw you, everything else just disappeared. I feel it too, she'd whispered. The bond. You're my mate. I am. His thumb had stroked her cheekbone. And you're mine, my fated mate. The one I've been searching for without even knowing I was searching. They'd kissed then, soft and sweet and perfect. Sarah's first kiss, and it had felt like coming home. Over the next 2 weeks, they'd met in secret every night. Cale had told her about his territory, about his dreams for the future, about the loneliness of being a young alpha without a mate to share the burden. Sarah had told him about her love of healing herbs, her hope to become a pack doctor, her fear that she'd never be more than Lord Bram's youngest daughter. "You're so much more than that," Cale had insisted. "You're brilliant and kind and strong. When you're ready, when we announce our bond, you'll be an incredible Luna." On their last night together, under the full moon, Cale had made his promise. He'd taken out a silver knife, cut his palm, and then offered the blade to her. This is old magic, older than the packs themselves. A blood promise between mates. Sarah had cut her own palm without hesitation, and they'd pressed their wounds together, letting their blood mingle. "I promise," Cale had said, his gold eyes intense, "that nothing will ever make me forget you. Not time, not distance, not death itself. You are mine, and I am yours, for all eternity." "I promise the same," Sarah had whispered. "Nothing will break us." He'd kissed the cut on her palm. "I have to return to Nightshade tomorrow. There's urgent business, raiders on our borders. But I'll come back in 3 weeks. We'll announce our bond properly with both packs' blessings. And then you'll come home with me as my Luna." 3 weeks, Sarah had agreed. "I can wait 3 weeks." But 3 weeks had turned into forever. The night everything ended, Sarah forced herself to remember the rest, even though the memories were like broken glass. Cale had left the next morning. Sarah had watched from her window as his convoy departed. Her hand pressed to her chest where the mate bond hummed warm and golden. 2 weeks passed. Sarah prepared for her new life, secretly packing her most precious belongings, imagining her future as Luna of Nightshade. She'd been so happy, so full of hope. Then the raiders came. It happened at night, always at night when defenses were lowest. Sarah had been in her room when she heard the first screams. She'd run to the window and seen flames. Her pack house was on fire. "Sarah, run!" Her mother had burst through the door, her eyes wild with terror. "Raiders! They're killing everyone!" But there was nowhere to run. The raiders had surrounded the territory. They moved through the pack house like demons, killing systematically. Sarah's father died defending the council room. Her mother died pushing Sarah out a window. "Live!" her mother had screamed, blood pouring from a wound in her chest. "Live for both of us!" Sarah had run into the forest, her nightgown torn and bloody, her feet bare. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of her pack dying, the mind links snapping one by one, like stars going out. She'd reached for Cale through the mate bond, screaming his name in her mind. "Cale, help us! They're killing everyone! Cale!" But there'd been no answer. The bond had felt strange, muffled somehow, like trying to shout through thick walls. The raiders had found her within the hour. A group of rogues, their eyes dead and cruel. They'd grabbed her, laughing as she fought and screamed. "This one's pretty," one had said. "She'll fetch a good price." They'd beaten her unconscious. When she woke, she was in chains in the back of a wagon, surrounded by other survivors. 12 people from a pack of over 200. Sarah had reached for the mate bond again, desperate. "Cale, please. I need you." Nothing. Silence. Over the following weeks, as she was sold and resold, as she moved from owner to owner, Sarah kept trying. Every day, she'd reach for that golden thread that connected her to Cale. And every day there was nothing. Eventually, she'd convinced herself that he must be dead. It was the only explanation. The mate bond was supposed to be unbreakable. If he was alive, he would have felt her distress. He would have come for her. But he never did. Present day, the personal attendant. "Sarah, wake up!" A sharp knock on her door jolted Sarah from her memories. Sunlight streamed through her small window. She'd cried herself to sleep and slept through breakfast. "Coming!" she called, hastily splashing water on her face and pulling on the simple gray dress Mrs. Hemsworth had provided. The head housekeeper stood in the hallway, her expression stern but not unkind. "The Alpha has requested you specifically. You're to be his personal attendant." Sarah's stomach dropped. "His what? Personal attendant? You'll bring his meals, maintain his private chambers, attend to his needs. It's actually a position of great privilege. Most servants work for years before being trusted with such responsibilities. Privilege. Sarah wanted to laugh. Being forced into close proximity with the man who'd forgotten her was torture, not privilege. I'm not sure I'm qualified. The Alpha specifically requested you. You don't refuse the Alpha. Mrs. Hemsworth's tone made it clear this wasn't a discussion. Report to his study in 10 minutes. And Sarah? Don't embarrass me. I vouched for you despite your condition. The study was exactly what Sarah expected, massive, filled with dark wood furniture and shelves of leather-bound books. Maps covered one wall, showing Nightshade territory and beyond. Cale stood at the window, his back to her, staring out at his lands. You asked for me, Alpha? Sarah kept her voice carefully neutral. He turned, and the morning light caught his face. For a moment, just a moment, she saw something flicker in his eyes. Confusion, recognition, but it was gone before she could be sure. I'm reorganizing the household staff, he said. I need someone I can trust in my private spaces. Someone who won't gossip or steal or scheme for position. And you think that's me? You bought me yesterday. You don't know anything about me. The words came out sharper than she intended. Cale's eyebrows rose slightly. You're right. I don't know you. But when I looked at you on that auction block, I felt. He paused, seeming to struggle for words. I felt like I should know you. Like you were important somehow. Sarah's heart stuttered. I'm just a slave, Alpha. I'm not important to anyone. Don't call yourself that. I don't keep slaves. You're a paid servant in my household now. He moved closer, and Sarah had to fight every instinct not to step back. And you're important enough that I paid 3,000 gold for you. Why did you? The question burst out before she could stop it. Really? Why did you pay so much for me? Cale was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. I don't know, he finally admitted. I saw you standing there, and something in my chest pulled tight, like I was looking at something precious I'd lost and found again. It doesn't make sense. It made perfect sense. The mate bond was trying to remind him, trying to break through whatever wall had been built around his memories. Your wrist, Cale said suddenly. That scar. How did you get it? Sarah's hand instinctively covered the white line where they'd made their blood promise. An accident. A long time ago. It looks like a ritual scar. From a blood oath. It's nothing. Just an old wound. The lie tasted bitter. Cale looked like he wanted to press further, but a knock on the door interrupted them. A beautiful woman swept in without waiting for permission. Her red hair perfectly styled. Her dress expensive silk. Cale, darling, I've been waiting for you too. She stopped, her green eyes landing on Sarah with immediate disdain. What is that doing in here? Lady Morgana. Cale's voice cooled several degrees. Sarah is my new personal attendant. Sarah, this is Lady Morgana Ashwood. My fiancé. The enemy revealed. The word fiancé hit Sarah like a physical blow. She'd known Cale must have moved on in 8 years. But hearing it confirmed, seeing this beautiful woman look at him with possessive pride, made the betrayal fresh and agonizing. Your personal attendant? Morgana's voice dripped with disdain. Surely you could find someone more presentable. She looks half dead. Morgana. Cale's tone held warning. I'm only being practical, darling. What will people think when they see this creature serving the Alpha of Nightshade? It reflects poorly on both of us. She moved closer to Cale, her hand possessive on his arm. Send her to the kitchens where she belongs. Sarah kept her eyes down, her whole body rigid. This woman, this cruel, beautiful woman, was going to be Cale's wife. She would be Luna in the position that should have been Sarah's. Sarah stays where I've assigned her, Cale said firmly. And you will treat all my servants with respect, Morgana. We've discussed this. Oh, we've discussed many things. Morgana's smile was sharp. Perhaps we should discuss the wedding date again? Your advisors are getting impatient. It's been 4 years since our engagement, Kale. People are starting to talk. For years. They'd been engaged for 4 years. The timeline made Sarah's mind race. 8 years since the Moon Valley attack. 4 years engaged to Morgana. What had happened in those first 4 years? We'll discuss it later, Kale said, his jaw tight. In private. Morgana's eyes flashed with anger, but she smoothed it over quickly. Of course. Later. She pressed a kiss to his cheek that lingered too long. I'll be in my chambers when you're finished with your household arrangements. She swept out, but not before giving Sarah a look that promised future cruelty. The silence in the study felt heavy. Kale rubbed his temple like he had a headache. I apologize for her behavior. Morgana can be difficult. She's your fiancé. You don't need to apologize to a servant for her. Sarah kept her voice flat, emotionless. I do when she's needlessly cruel. He sighed. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Have we met before? Before yesterday. This was her chance. She could tell him everything. Tell him about the forest meetings, the blood promise, the love they'd shared. But what would be the point? He was engaged to another woman. And even if he believed her, even if somehow his memories returned, it wouldn't change what had happened. It wouldn't give her back the 8 years she'd lost. No, Alpha, she lied again. We've never met. He looked disappointed, like he'd hoped she'd say something different. Very well. Mrs. Hemsworth will show you your new duties. You're dismissed. Sarah bowed and left quickly, before the tears could start again. Fragments of truth. The next 2 weeks fell into a painful routine. Sarah attended to Kale's private chambers, brought his meals, maintained his wardrobe. They were in close quarters constantly, and every interaction was torture. She learned things about him, how he took his coffee, that he had nightmares that made him wake gasping, that he spent hours staring at old maps like he was searching for something lost. She learned that his servants respected him but feared him, that he was a fair but strict alpha, that he'd earned the title Heartless because no one had ever seen him show real emotion. And she learned about Morgana. The woman was a nightmare dressed in silk. She was cruel to all the servants, but seemed to particularly enjoy tormenting Sarah, accidentally spilling hot tea on her, giving her impossible tasks, making cutting comments about her appearance. I can't imagine what Kale sees in you, Morgana said one afternoon, finding Sarah changing the sheets in Kale's bedroom. You're nothing special, just another broken slave. Sarah bit her tongue and continued working. You know, Morgana continued, moving closer. Kale has been acting strangely since he bought you, having dreams, asking odd questions. I don't like it. That's not my concern, Lady Morgana. Oh, but it is. Because if I find out you're doing something to interfere with my engagement, slave or not, I'll make sure you regret it. The threat in her voice was clear. After Morgana left, Sarah sat on the edge of Kale's bed and pressed her hand to her mouth to muffle her sobs. How much more could she take? How much longer could she survive being this close to him, loving him still, while he prepared to marry another woman? That night, she was bringing Kale's evening meal to his study when she heard voices. Kale and a man she didn't recognize. The dreams are getting worse, Kale was saying. Every night, the same forest clearing. The same girl's face, but I can never quite see it clearly. And this feeling like I've forgotten something crucial. It's been 8 years since the incident, Alpha, the other man said gently. The healers said the head injury caused severe memory loss. It's possible these dreams are fragments trying to resurface. Sarah nearly dropped the tray. Head injury. Memory loss? But why now? Why start dreaming about this after 8 years? Perhaps seeing something or someone familiar triggered it? Sarah backed away from the door, her mind reeling. He'd been injured. He hadn't chosen to forget her. He literally couldn't remember. Everything suddenly made terrible, heartbreaking sense. The night the memories returned. Sarah couldn't sleep. The revelation about Kale's head injury had turned everything she thought she knew upside down. He hadn't abandoned her. He hadn't forgotten her by choice. He'd been injured, and somehow his memories of her had been lost. But that raised new questions. What had happened to him? And why, after 8 years, were his memories starting to return now? She was still awake at midnight when she heard the scream. It came from Cale's chambers, raw and agonized. Sarah ran without thinking, her bare feet silent on the cold stone floors. She burst through his door to find him on his knees beside the bed, hands clutching his head, his whole body shaking. "Cale!" She dropped beside him, reaching for him instinctively. "What's wrong? What's happening?" His gold eyes were wide and unfocused, seeing something she couldn't. "Sarah," he gasped. "The forest. The moon. Your blood on mine."
I promisa ide nave furget.
Her heart stopped. "What did you say?" "I see you. 17 years old, laughing in the moonlight. My mate. You're my mate." His hands found her face, desperate and shaking. "I cut my palm. You cut yours. We made a blood oath. How could I forget? How could I forget you?" Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "You had a head injury. You said, I heard you talking about memory loss. It's coming back. Everything." His voice cracked. "I left to deal with raiders. I was gonna come back for you. 3 weeks, I said 3 weeks. But we were ambushed on the road. I took a blow to the head, fell into a ravine. My men thought I was dead. How long?"
Sera whispered.
"How long were you missing?" 3 months. When they found me, I was barely alive. The healers saved me, but the memories." He pulled back, gold eyes now crystal clear and full of devastating recognition. It's you. It's been you this whole time, and I didn't know. I looked right at you and didn't know. What happened after you recovered?" Sarah needed to understand everything. Cale stood, pacing like a caged animal. "I had gaps, huge gaps in my memory. The healers said it might come back or it might not. I remembered my name, my pack, my duties. But there was this feeling like I'd lost something crucial. I kept searching for something I couldn't name. And Moon Valley? My pack." His face went pale. "By the time I was conscious enough to ask questions, it was 4 months after I'd left. My advisors told me Moon Valley had been destroyed by raiders. Everyone dead, no survivors. His voice broke. "I mourned you. I mourned a girl whose face I couldn't quite remember, but who I knew was important. They thought I was going mad. I wasn't dead." Sarah's voice was hollow. 12 of us survived. We were taken as slaves. If I'd known, if I'd remembered you, I would have burned the world down to find you." Cale's hands were fists at his sides. 8 years. You've been suffering for 8 years while you what? Fell in love with Morgana? The words came out bitter.
No.
Cale's answer was immediate and fierce. "I've never loved Morgana. I don't even particularly like her. The engagement was political, arranged by my council 4 years ago. They said I needed a Luna, that I couldn't rule alone forever. I agreed because it didn't matter. Without you, without even remembering you, nothing mattered." Sarah wanted to believe him, wanted so desperately to believe that the love they'd shared hadn't been completely destroyed. "The scar on your wrist," Cale said suddenly. "I saw it that first day and something pulled in my chest. That was from our blood oath." Sarah held out her arm, showing him the thin white line. "I've looked at it every day for 8 years, remembering your promise that nothing would make you forget me. I broke that promise." Cale's voice was raw with guilt. "Not by choice, but I broke it nonetheless. You were injured. You lost your memories. That's not the same as choosing to abandon me. Isn't it?" He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. "You suffered because I failed to come back for you. You were enslaved, hurt, broken. While I was here, living in comfort, preparing to marry another woman. A woman you don't love. A woman I'm breaking my engagement to right now." Cale's eyes blazed with determination. "I don't care about politics or alliances or what the council says. You are my true mate. The mate I promised myself to under the moon. Everything else is meaningless." Morgana's true face.